Over the 20-year history of the Battlefield franchise, there have been many great maps worthy of praise. Some maps become legendary, icons themselves of the Battlefield series and worth remembering for their balance, uniqueness, and special gameplay. This is the story of the best maps of Battlefield. Most Battlefield players are familiar with Iwo Jima through its Battlefield 5 interpretation. While this map was portrayed with historical accuracy in mind, it nevertheless was a disappointment in balanced map design for a multiplayer game. But long before Battlefield 5 let players on the sands of Iwo Jima, Battlefield 1942 let gamers clash over the island, and it was a wholly different experience. The legendary battle was one of 1942's launch maps, and it was one which players strongly enjoyed, although it did not hold the same level of popularity as Wake Island. Unlike the Battlefield 5 version, limitations of the engine saw an island significantly reduced in scale, although it was still pretty large for a 1942 map. The entire island was accessible, and despite no flags being present near the surrounding mountain range of the airfield, players could still walk a great distance to find multiple stationary AA emplacements, def guns, or more frequently, a few lone snipers isolated from the main fight. The entire island of Iwo Jima retained an accurate shape, with the large Japanese airfield located on the low open plain. A slight increase in elevation from the airfield up the main road is dotted with bunker fortifications and flag locations, many of them overlooking the main landing beach, intended for US forces. As the island reaches its zenith, the path steepens and leads towards the highest peak of Mount Suribachi. The island possesses 5 flags, 4 of which begin in Japanese control and another one neutral. Mount Suribachi is the highest flag on the map and the most fortified position on the island. It consists of barbed wire, sandbags, a stationary AA emplacement, 4 mounted machine guns, a tank spawn, and a coastal defense gun, which can be aimed downhill toward the rest of the island, making itself a source of frustration for many other players getting shelled throughout the round. This makes Mount Suribachi a major objective for players, aside of course from the altitude advantage. Down the steep hill, 2 major flags can be found along the road. These are called, almost obviously, the Suribachi bunkers and the Japanese bunkers. Bunkers are the only obvious major feature here. A single entrance allows players access inside, where the frontal opening grants a clear view of the initially neutral landing beach flag below, and perhaps a glimpse of the US fleet. The mounted MG-42s in each bunker make the user an easy target for snipers, but some decent tracking on enemy players make them extremely effective from their positions. Another coastal defense gun near the Suribachi bunker allows the Japanese team to hammer the ships offshore and allied landing craft. These flags, which each have a very small capture radius, are among the most actively fought over flags on the map, given their close positions and access to Mount Suribachi. These bunkers along the hill can also provide cover for players moving around the vicinity. However, they can be brutally spawn camped, the only major flaw of the map. Players almost exclusively spawn inside the bunkers, and enemies inside can kill your team immediately, or the doorways can be grenade spammed, or players can be killed immediately on exit. The only other spawn point seems to be literally on top of the flag, and as such is no better. If the Japanese team is reduced to a single flag and it's either of these, frustrations can definitely mount. However, a whole team spawning in unison with the respawn timer might just provide enough players to break out. The landing beach, the only neutral flag at the start of the round, is intended for the US team to capture, and once taken, cannot be recaptured by the Japanese team. It becomes a permanent US base and spawns a Sherman tank. This objective, while providing continuous US reinforcements, is still a deadly zone, as Japanese enemies from the hill and bunkers rain hell on newly spawned players with bullets and grenades. Of note, despite being able to take cover along the coastline, there is only one path for players to get up off the beach and onto the island proper, just a short distance away from the Japanese bunkers. Lastly, there is the airfield flag, a good distance away from the others. The airfield comprises a large chunk of the map, with the runway ending towards the bunkers. 2 Japanese aircraft, one Zero and one Ikeval bomber, spawn on the runway, and can be stolen by US players if they manage to cross the empty expanse. During the round, Japanese planes sometimes have a difficult time taking off, being shot down by bazookas, running over enemy landmines, or being shelled by the US fleet. There is also a strangely placed AA gun at the end of the runway which, when held by an enemy, can obliterate aircraft and players in seconds. The flag itself is positioned in a cluster of buildings, including a maintenance bay and a small hangar, which has 2 medium Chiha tanks which spawn in front. 2 jeeps are provided here as well, perfectly placed as they are needed to cross the expanse both to the flags and to the planes. Should the airfield fall to US forces, US planes and tanks will spawn instead of Japanese vehicles, a definite overpowered asset swing. Iwo Jima's flag layout and vehicle assets are positioned in such a way that action is constant and rotations are based on critically in-demand objectives. Moreover, the terrain layout is large enough that players can move around the map outside of the major battles and capture points from behind. Remember, this is a game where one player could neutralize a flag just by being present on it, regardless if 30 enemy players were on it as well. A quick flag gray removed enemy respawn threats and frequently allowed for fast, sneaky recaptures, and this contributed greatly to Iwo Jima's enjoyability as it gave players purpose. One major feature of note on the map is that of the US fleet. Like that of other amphibious assault maps, the US team begins by grouping on 2 major ships, the aircraft carrier and the battleship. They then board the landing craft and head toward the beach. Iwo Jima is one of only 2 vanilla 1942 maps to feature a battleship, and its player-controlled main guns can pound the island and the Japanese defenders. On the aircraft carrier, 1 Corsair fighter and 1 SBD dive bomber spawn as air assets to counter the enemy air threat. Like all 1942 maps, these ships are drivable, and players can move them anywhere around the map that they wish. In this way, like other Pacific Theater maps of the game, these rounds are dynamic, ever-changing experiences where US landing craft can launch and land on any side of the island, making a grind on one side unlikely and defenders must stay ever vigilant. It also gives a use for the def guns mounted around the island, which after a number of salvos can sink both the battleship and carrier, ridding the US of their precious fleet and potentially winning the round. Iwo Jima in Battlefield 1942 was an intense map which allowed for meaningful gameplay on land, air, and sea. The flag structure created a grind environment suitable for a battle of such magnitude, but it did not confine the map to spawn camping. Extra hills provided meaningful cover. AA guns placed around the map mostly keep aircraft in check, but huge bomb kills are still obtainable given the clumping of players on the beach, bunkers, and especially atop Mount Suribachi. All playstyles, from direct assault play, tanking, sniping, and just memeing with jihad jeeps, landmines, and plane rams, are beneficial to the outcome of the map. Perhaps its wider size and jagged landscape is the reason it wasn't as popular as Wake Island, but it nevertheless consistently offered faster-paced gameplay than its peer in the Conquest Assault style, fueled by the dynamic gameplay advantages offered by drivable warships. Iwo Jima's original Battlefield entry has stood the test of time.